Hi, Katie. We have the Mystery at Lilac Inn. We are on Chapter 3, A Stolen Charge Plate. Nancy was shocked by Hannah's news. "Have you called the police about the prowler?" she asked the housekeeper. "No, I wanted to tell you first. I didn't know what had happened until I carried some clean clothes to your room. The second floor seemed to be the only place disturbed." Hannah explained that she had tried to reach Mr. Drew at his hotel in Cleveland, where he was working on a case. But the lawyer had been out. "I'll be home as soon as possible," Nancy promised. "In the meantime, please notify Chief McGinnis." "I will, Nancy. Goodbye." Nancy was about to put down the phone when she heard a click on the line. Instantly, she wondered if someone at Lilac Inn had been purposely listening in on her call. Before Nancy could speculate further, Emily joined her. Quickly, Nancy gave her friend Hannah's report. "I must borrow a car and go right home," she said. Emily expressed concern about the apparent burglary. "I hope nothing valuable was taken. But, Nancy, you must have breakfast before you go." Emily led the way to the dining room. Nancy asked her where the other telephones at the inn were located and mentioned the fact that someone might have been eavesdropping on her conversation. "Every room has an extension," Emily said, "but only the ones connected right now, besides the desk phone, are in the kitchen, my bedroom, my aunt's, and the recreation room." The young sleuth hastily excused herself. "I'd like to make a few inquiries, Meet me at the table, will you?" Nancy went into the kitchen. She saw Anna, the waitress, and asked the girl if anyone had used the telephone within the past few minutes. No one had. Then Nancy hurried to the recreation room. It was empty. When Nancy reached the dining room, she found Emily at the table alone. "Did you learn anything?" Emily asked. "No," Emily whispered. "I just remembered, Nancy. Maud had her phone hooked up yesterday." Ooh, suspicious. At that moment, Maud came into the dining room. Nancy learned that Maud had just returned from a walk along the river. A few moments later, Mrs. Willoughby, Helen, and John arrived. None had used the phone that morning. "Guess that click didn't mean an eavesdropper at the inn," Nancy thought. The others were sympathetic upon hearing her reason for returning home immediately. John promptly offered to drive Nancy in the jeep, but Mrs. Willoughby laughed and said, "I can give you a more comfortable ride, Nancy." As she started to explain, Anna came to take the orders of those at the table. "I have to drive to River Heights Bank this morning," Mrs. Willoughby went on, "to get Emily's diamonds from the safe deposit box. I'd be delighted to have company." Before Nancy could reply, Maud Potter repeated shrilly, "Emily's diamonds?" I can't really do shrill. Mrs. Willoughby nodded. As you know, I've been Emily's guardian for 5 years, since her parents were killed in the plane crash. Her mother's will states that she's to receive the jewels when she's 21. Emily dimpled. "That's in 2 weeks, but I coaxed Aunt Hazel into letting me have them earlier. I'm going to sell enough to help Dick and me with expenses at the inn." Nancy smiled. "That must be the plan you told me about yesterday." "That's right." Emily's eyes sparkled. Maud had been listening intently. She said to Mrs. Willoughby, "You told me there were 20 unset diamonds. I suppose they're worth quite a bit." Mrs. Willoughby smiled. "Yes, over $50,000, which is a lot of money back in the day. It's a lot of money now, but it was a heck of a lot of money back in the day." Maud remarked pointedly, "You'd better be careful, Hazel. Some people would like to get their hands on those jewels." As soon as Mrs. Willoughby finished her toast and coffee, she arose from the table. "Nancy," she said, "I'll get the car." The 3 girls excused themselves and went outside. "Perhaps, Helen," Nancy said, "you'd like to stay at the inn. I'll be driving back, and you can stop at your house to pick up whatever clothes you need." "Thanks, Nancy. I'd like to stay. I'll phone Mother." Emily asked if Nancy would have a chance to do her a favor in River Heights. "I'd ask Aunt Hazel, but she wants to get back here as soon as possible with my diamonds." "I'd be glad to. What is it, Em?" "Find out if the Empire Employment Agency has any waitresses available." "Did you get Mary Mason through them?" Nancy asked. "No, she stopped here, but her references were excellent, so I engaged her. I'd be happy to do the errand for you, Emily, Nancy said. Mrs. Willoughby pulled up in her black sedan, and Nancy climbed in front. John had come outside, too. Don't forget, he said to her, we have a skin diving date when you get back. At that moment, Maud Potter hurried from the inn to the car. I'll come along if you don't mind, the social director said blithely. She hopped in beside Nancy without waiting for an invitation. Mrs. Willoughby's lips tightened, but she made no comment. Goodbyes were exchanged, and the car started off. Soon the sedan was speeding along the main highway. Any ideas about your burglar? Maud asked Nancy. No, Nancy admitted, except he might have been trying to break into Dad's safe. Maud cocked her head. Does your father keep important papers at home? Sometimes, Nancy replied noncommittally. She tried to hide her annoyance at the woman's inquisitiveness. Mrs. Willoughby frowned disapprovingly. Don't ask so many questions, Maud. The social director shrugged. Once more, she turned to Nancy. Arching her eyebrows coyly, she said, I'd love to meet your dad sometime. I understand he's a widower. This is the last straw, Nancy thought. Though annoyed, she had to suppress a smile at the woman's remark. Maud Potter was certainly not the type of person to interest her father. Dad keeps very busy and travels a lot on his cases, Nancy said coolly. He's away now. Maud's coyness vanished. I see. No time for his social life, she said sarcastically. To Nancy's relief, the woman spoke hardly at all for the balance of the trip. Presently, Mrs. Willoughby pulled up into the winding driveway of the Drews' handsome brick house, surrounded by a velvety green lawn. Nancy expressed her thanks for the ride and said goodbye. She hurried into the house for the moment, forgetting Lilac completely. Hannah Gruen greeted her with, Oh, Nancy, dear, I'm so glad you're back. I've been frantic. Nancy hugged the pleasant-faced woman, who said that Police Chief McGinnis had stopped at the house to investigate the burglary. No silver or other valuables are missing, Hannah went on, but your room is a mess. Whoever was here must have been after something you keep there. The woman frowned worriedly. Nancy dashed up the stairs. What a sight met her eyes as she entered her room! Bureau and chest drawers were open, their contents spilling out. Perfume bottles lay overturned on her dressing table. Clothes had been pulled from the closet and flung onto the bed and floor. Mrs. Gruen, who had followed Nancy, explained, Chief McGinnis wanted me to leave everything like this for you to see. Nancy nodded. How was the house entered? Through the back door, Hannah replied. The chief said the intruder must be an expert lockpicker and burglar. He left no fingerprints. Excuse me. Nancy hurried into her father's bedroom. Nothing here had been disturbed, apparently. She went into the adjoining den and was relieved to see that the thief had not broken into the safe. The only thing missing from here is my picture, Nancy reported to Hannah. Oh dear, what does it all mean? The housekeeper asked worriedly. Before Nancy could continue, the phone rang, and she answered it. Miss Nancy Drew? A woman asked. Yes. This is Burke's department store. I'm Mrs. Riley of the fine jewelry department. I've made a terrible mistake when I sold you that watch this morning. The price was $125, not $50 as I told you. Do you still want to keep it? Utterly astounded, Nancy said, Mrs. Riley, I didn't buy a watch this morning. I was out of town. Isn't your charge number 10-48575? Wait, please. I'll check. Nancy hurried to open the desk drawer where she had put Burke's charge plate. Its leather case was in there. I think it's basically like a credit card, like old-fashioned credit card. Its leather case was there, but the metal plate was not inside. It's been stolen! Nancy exclaimed. With a sense of foreboding, she returned to the phone. I'll drive right down to see the manager, Nancy said. My charge plate has been stolen, I'm afraid. Nancy paused long enough to tell Hannah of her discovery and to notify Chief McGinnis. The officer said he would meet her at the store manager's office. Just as she was about to enter Burke's, Nancy stopped short. To her amazement, she saw Maud Potter entering the Empire Employment Agency office across the street. Now what's up? Nancy wondered. Is Maud trying to engage a waitress for the inn, too? Puzzled, she hurried into the department store and took an elevator to the third-floor office of the manager, Mr. Goldsmith. "I'm Nancy Drew," she greeted him pleasantly. "I want to explain—" She got no further. With a stern look, the manager said curtly, "I know all about the watch you claimed not to have bought early this morning. But how about those other items you carried away?" Dumbfounded, Nancy could only echo, "Other items?" Grimly, the manager continued, "I don't know what your game is, Miss Drew, but unless you have a twin, you owe Burke's department store for merchandise worth $2,000. Whoa, a lot of money. Gonna find out what happened. Seems like Nancy has some twin running around. We'll have to find out.